and welcome to this video on how to prioritize your resources in Logos Bible software. Online you can find many tutorials on how to use the prioritization tool, but that's not the goal of my video. The goal of my videos in general is not to show you how to use certain tools in Logos, but how to use these tools in real life. In this video, I assume that you know how to make section dividers. If you don't worry, because in the description of this video below is a link to another YouTube video that I created on how to create those section headings in order to organize your prioritization tool a little bit. What I will do in this video is basically two things. In the first place, I will demonstrate how I use the prioritization tool in real life for my Bible study. I will show you what the benefits are of taking some time to organize your preferred resources in the prioritization tool. Secondly, I will show you my prioritization tool and show you exactly which resources I have prioritized and why I have prioritized them in the order that I have prioritized them. You will see that I have divided my prioritization tool into different sections, and I will explain why I did that. My ultimate goal with this video is to ensure you that the time you invest in setting up your prioritization tool will ultimately pay you back many times through a more efficient study of the Bible. Alright, let me start by showing you how I access my resources in real life utilizing my prioritization tool. As you probably know, the prioritization tool is found in your library. So I've opened my library, and in my library there's an information icon. When I click that information icon, there are two options. The first option gives information about a book that you select, but the prioritization list is next to that. There's an alternative way to access the prioritization tool, and that's by going to the menu and then prioritize books. These are some of my advanced prioritizations, and I will explain to you exactly how and why I have these prioritized. First of all, let's start in our Bible in Genesis 3 verse 1 using the NIV that I've also set as my preferred Bible, as you can see over here. On the right of the NIV, you see the Treasury of Scripture Knowledge, which is my favorite resource for studying cross-references. And as I hover over these verses, these cross-references, you see that the NIV is presented to me. And the same, when I click any reference from the Treasury of Scripture Knowledge, then the NIV is activated here below, and it is this copy of the NIV and not the original copy of the NIV, because I have told Logos to send all hyperlinks here. So whenever I click a reference from the TSK, I know for sure that the Logos is returning the NIV to me. And this is what I want to happen, that Logos gives me the references in English using my preferred Bible. And as you look at the Power Lookup tool on the right side, then you see that all references in there are also taken from the NIV. So far, so good. But now I want to go a little bit more in depth by looking up what the underlying Hebrew word is for crafty, here in verse 1. And I want Logos to immediately open not a random dictionary or lexicon, but my preferred Hebrew lexicon, which is the Dictionary of Classical Hebrew. And the only thing I have to do is to double click, and Logos for sure will open up not a random dictionary, but my preferred Dictionary of Classical Hebrew. By the way, if double clicking any word in the English translation does not take you to a dictionary, any dictionary, what you need to do is you go to Settings, Program Settings, and in Program Settings you scroll down until you see Text Display, and on the Text Display you see Double Click Action, and you just make sure that you select Look Up. So now that we are in the Hebrew lexicon, what I want you to see is that whenever I study Hebrew, and I look into my Hebrew lexicon, there are many references here. And these references are to the Old Testament in Hebrew. And they tell me how the word crafty, how the word arum is used in different contexts. So what I want to see is, if I hover over these texts, then I don't want to see English, I want to see my Hebrew Bible instead of the preferred NIV. And that's exactly what happens. So you hover over any of these references in my Hebrew dictionary, and it will take me to the BHS And because I prioritized my Dictionary of Classical Hebrew in a certain way, what you see is that the Power Lookup tool will also refer to the Hebrew text of my Hebrew Bible, as you can see over here. But what do you think will happen if I click a reference from my Dictionary of Classical Hebrew? Will it open the BHS? No. Look what happens. I click Proverbs 12 verse 16 and the NIV, my preferred Bible, is opening up. Why? Is this random action of Logos? No, it's because I told Logos to send all hyperlinks to the NIV and not to my Hebrew Bible. So this send hyperlinks here feature overrules the prioritization tool in this case, okay? Many people think the way Logos acts is so random, but that's not Logos' fault. There's a big chance that you have never taken the time to prioritize your resources, to customize your Logos Bible software by prioritizing your resources. And you really can't blame Logos for not knowing which resources are your preferred ones, if you don't tell it what your preferences are. So we can do something similar to the New Testament. So let's go to Revelation 12 and notice here that the treasure of scripture knowledge still shows references in English using the NIV, which is what I want. And the same for the Power Lookup tool. But whenever I double click a word in my English Bible, again, I don't want the Logos to show me a random dictionary. I want my preferred lexicon, my BDAC, to open up. And that's exactly what happens. Now we have here the word Selene in Greek, the Greek word for moon. You see lots of references here. And again, when I'm studying Greek and I look up a Greek word, like here's Selene, then I don't want Logos to show me references to my English Bible, but I want to study the Greek word Selene in its original Greek contexts. And that's exactly what Logos does. So, for example, here is a reference to Joel, and Logos presents the reference to me in Greek using the Septuagint. And I've told Logos to use this resource in my prioritization tool. Here is a reference to the Testament of Naphtali, a pseudepigraphon in Greek. And if I hover over the reference, then again, it gives me the Greek context. The same for the references to the New Testament. Here's a reference to Luke 21 verse 25. And Logos presents to me Nestle Aland 828, which is my preferred Greek New Testament. Here's a reference to 1 Clement. And if I hover over the reference of 1 Clement, then I get the Greek text of the Apostolic Fathers. Now, when I select a few references here in BDAC, the Power Lookup tool will give me those references in the Greek text as well. But then again, if I click a reference, for example, if I click this reference to 1 Clement, one of the Apostolic Fathers, then Logos does not give me the Greek text, but it gives me the English text, so I can really quickly look over the larger context of this verse. And I did it by doing the same thing as to my Bible. I told Logos to send all hyperlinks to the Apostolic Fathers to this panel, which is the English version. Had I not done that, so let me toggle this off, and then I click on Clement 20 verse 3, then it opens up the Greek text. So these tools really work nicely together if you know how to work with them. So what do we need to do to let Logos do exactly what we want rather than opening up random resources? And the answer is prioritize your resources. And this is not simply putting a few 5 or 6 resources into your prioritization tool. No, it means that you carefully think through your library and select the resources that you really like and put all of these resources in the prioritization tool. Let's have a look at my prioritization list. These are not 5 or 6 books, but there's a whole list of them, and they all come in useful here and there in my studies. Why? Because I want Logos to do what I want it to do, rather than being surprised by resources that Logos randomly offers me. When you have never prioritized your resources before, I recommend that you start by prioritizing your preferred Bible, in my case the NIV, at the top of your prioritization list, directly followed by your preferred Hebrew and Greek lexicon, in my case the Dictionary of Classical Hebrew and BDAC for the Greek New Testament. But rather than going down the prioritization list, we will be going up. That may surprise some of you, because what you see is a lot of advanced prioritizations above my preferred Bible. Let me explain why this section of advanced prioritizations is at the top of my list, right above my preferred Bible. The way that Logos looks at the prioritization tool is from the top above. It looks at the first applicable resource and then, in most cases, stops looking any further. Now, the point here is not, of course, that you have to follow exactly my prioritizations, but the point is that it is in your hands to let Logos do whatever you want it to do, rather than showing you random resources. And I'll continue to say this throughout this video. The prioritization tool is your way to customize your Logos Bible software. The more you apply advanced prioritization, the more you can customize your software to better meet your needs. But again, why are these advanced prioritizations at the top of everything? Well, what happens as soon as you put your preferred Bible over the advanced prioritization, then Logos looks from above, and the first resource it encounters is your preferred Bible, and then it will stop looking any further. So the highest prioritized resource will overrule prioritized resources that are lower in the hierarchy. And this is something to remember because it's the primary principle behind the prioritization tool. A higher prioritized resource always overrules lower prioritized resources. Let me demonstrate that. Like you have seen that all these references in BDAG refer to the Greek text. But let me take a random, let's say the NRSV. Let me take the NRSV and put on top of my advanced prioritizations. Now, guess what will happen if I hover over any references in my BDAG? Now, it returns to me the text in the NRSV. So you see that now my top prioritized resources that I have put at the top of my advanced prioritizations overrule all my advanced prioritizations. And that's the reason why you always need to move your advanced prioritizations to the top of your prioritization tool. So I will delete this for now because it will damage my prioritization strategy. And so it is as if we tell Logos now that, yeah, in most cases you can use the NIV, but in very specific cases, I want you to open up another resource. And these are set by the advanced prioritizations. You will now also understand that if you temporarily want to change the behavior of Logos and say you want to see the NIV in BDAG, what you do is you just drag the NIV on top of your advanced prioritizations and Logos will show you the NIV from BDAG rather than the Greek text, and you can change that later. Okay, let's now see how I used the advanced prioritization feature to specify which resources to display in BDAG when hovering over references in BDAG. First of all, since I have a number of advanced prioritizations for BDAG, I created the section divider for BDAG, advanced for BDAG, that helps me quickly navigate through the prioritization tool and help me organize my resources a little bit more. And again, at the end of this video, there will be a link to another video that explains how to create those section dividers. As you see, I have prioritized 6 resources for BDAG, and you can prioritize more, but these are the ones that are most relevant to me when I'm using BDAG. The resources I have prioritized for using in BDAG are Nestle Aland 28 as my Greek Bible for any New Testament reference in BDAG, the Septuagint as my Greek Bible for any Old Testament reference in BDAG, the Old Testament pseudepigrapha for any references in BDAG to the pseudepigrapha, such as the Testament of Moses, Testament of the 12 Patriarchs, Sibylline Oracles, etc. Then I've prioritized the Apostolic Fathers in Greek for any references in BDAG to the Apostolic Fathers, such as First Clement, or Polycarp, or the Didache, or the Shepherd of Hermas. And finally, I have prioritized the Greek editions of Philo and Josephus for any reference in BDAG to any of their writings. So let's break down how to prioritize these resources the advanced way. For the sake of this video, I will now add another instance of the Nestle Aland 28, and I'll start there from scratch. First, you need to understand what you are doing. What you want to do is to tell Logos that whenever you see a reference in BDAG, You want Logos to take you to your preferred Greek Bible, which is in my case, Nestle Aland 28. So the resource that you want to prioritize is NA28 and not BDAG. So in my library, I drag my Greek Bible to my prioritization list, and now instead of prioritizing a single resource, the NA28, Logos prioritized a series called Hebrew and Greek Bibles, and has 2 volumes in it. And this is because I told Logos to consider my Hebrew BHS and my Greek Nestle Aland 28 as one series, so I can access any reference in the Hebrew Old Testament directly from my Greek New Testament and vice versa. If you haven't done so, then dragging the NA28 will just show the NA28. But this is not what I want. I don't want to prioritize this series, so I remove this from my list, and I right click on this specific resource, the NA28, and I select prioritize this book. Now this is one of the awkward things in Logos that makes me really feel bad. Logos places that individual resource at the bottom of my list, and the only thing that I can do is to just be patient and move this up to the top of my prioritization list. Now this is one of the things where Logos still have to improve, and I really hope one day Logos will give a good facelift of this prioritization tool and make it much more user friendly. Anyway, it works. So here we are. We'll place it at the top of our BDAG. Here we are. There we go. So now you see that the Nestle Aland 28 is prioritized, but is prioritized for everything. So we right click and we set the prioritization limits, advanced. And what Logos shows now is a little box with 3 parameters. Apply only to references of this type in this range and from this book. Okay. So the first one to set is the bottom one, because you want to apply this prioritized resource to a specific resource, being BDAG. So by selecting BDAG, you tell Logos, whenever you see BDAG, then my Greek New Testament applies. Now this might be enough, but you may want to be a little bit more specific. You are mostly interested in the Bible references, so you select this one. What this means is you tell Logos that NA28 applies whenever it sees BDAG, but only when it finds a Bible reference that is found in Nestle Aland 28. In other words, this excludes references to the Septuagint. Septuagint will still be in English if you haven't said it yet, but because the Septuagint is not part of Nestle Aland 28, of course. Finally, but I never do that, you can specify the range of references that this prioritization applies to. So for example, you can say only apply this advanced prioritization to the Gospels. So Luke is given in Greek and Corinthians is given in English. But I don't want that to happen, so I just delete this one, and now Corinthians 15 is given in Greek again. Okay, and you can do this with any of the resources. So here's the Septuagint. I told Logos, whenever you come across BDAG and you see a reference to the Septuagint, you open up the Septuagint with Logos morphology. Same for Philo. Whenever you see a reference to Philo, then I want you to open up the works of Philo, Greek text with morphology. Well, that was a lot. I hope you now understand how the advanced prioritization tool works, and I recommend you to play around with this powerful feature. Let's now go back to the top of my prioritization list and show you which sections we have covered so far. As I've explained before, at the top are my most specific advanced prioritizations, because they need to overrule my general prioritizations. Then within that section of advanced prioritizations, I've created a separate heading for advanced prioritizations for BDAG, because I use BDAG a lot. Further down, I have prioritized my Greek Bible, so here for example my Greek New Testament, to my Greek grammar. So whenever I open my Greek grammar and I see a reference to the Greek New Testament, the reference will show in Greek rather than in English. And oh yeah, my last one here is an important one too. If you want the treasury of scripture knowledge to always refer to you in English, what you can do is you can advanced prioritize the NIV to the treasury of scripture knowledge. So again, here there's the treasury of scripture knowledge. So I'm telling Logos here, whenever you see the treasury of scripture knowledge and you see any references to the Bible, then I want you to open up the NIV. Then my next section is called my absolute top resources. And why? It's because these are the resources, the NIV and my Greek and Hebrew lexicon, that I use all the time. So it's the NIV that I use as my default Bible, and it's my default Greek and Hebrew lexicon, BDAG, and the Dictionary of Classical Hebrew. Now these are at the top of my prioritizations, right below the advanced prioritizations, because I want to use these resources in all instances, except for those specific cases where I want the advanced prioritizations to take over. So as a result, whenever I see a Bible reference, for example in a commentary like this, in all cases where I have not applied an advanced prioritization, Logos will present these references in English in the NIV. And whenever I double click a word in my English Bible, the fact that I have prioritized my Hebrew and Greek lexicon here guarantees that Logos will take me to my preferred lexicon here. Now please forgive me that I digress a little bit here, because this is now the second time that you see a self-created series in my prioritization tool. The first one was a series of my Hebrew Old Testament and my Greek New Testament, and now you see a series of my Hebrew Dictionary of Classical Hebrew and my Greek BDAG. Let me briefly explain to you how to set up such a series, either for your Hebrew and Greek Bibles or for your Hebrew and Greek lexicons. So what you do is you go to your library and you search for DCH or BDAG. And you sort by ranking. Now here I have my lexicon, my Hebrew lexicon, and here I have my BDAG. So what you do is you go to the information pane here, you scroll down until you see series. And what you do is you make sure that the series name of BDAG is exactly the same as the one for the DCH. So here's the DCH. I click that resource, I go down to series, and I just make sure that the series name is exactly the same. So how this is helpful is when you now are in BDAG and I type in a Hebrew reference, let's say sus, horse, it takes me from BDAG to my Hebrew lexicon. And in the same way, I can do the opposite. From my Hebrew lexicon, now I type doulos, and it takes me to the Greek lexicon. And second, you can now prioritize both resources at the same time as a series by dragging either resource to the prioritization tool, which is what I did here. And as I said, you can do exactly the same with your Hebrew Old Testament and Greek New Testament, which will allow you to go to your Hebrew Bible from your Greek New Testament and vice versa. The next section is what I call my top 10 versified prioritized resources. For this section, I'm indebted to late Morris Proctor in his MP seminars. Versified resources are resources that are not Bibles, but nevertheless the way you navigate those resources are by Bible references. So commentaries are versified resources, but these versified resources are different from commentaries in that Logos identifies them as monographs rather than as commentaries. Now I will explain why I have selected these top 10 versified prioritized resources. And for that we go to Matthew 5 verse 33 and I right click on verse 33. Now notice that on the left hand side of my context menu, the reference to Matthew 5 verse 33 is selected rather than the English word you or a Greek underlying lemma. So the reference Matthew 5 verse 33 is selected. And when I go to the right, I go all the way down and then here you see 5 resources: the NIV, Matthew Henry, the New Manners and Customs of the Bible, Old Testament quotations of the New Testament, and the Harmony of the Gospels. Now, these are from my prioritized resources, and these are exactly the resource that I have prioritized here. So first of all, you have the NIV, because that is on top here. So this is the NIV, that's a given there. But then you have Matthew Henry, then you have the New Manners and Customs of the Bible, abbreviated NMCB, followed by the Old Testament quotations in the New Testament, followed by the Harmony of the Gospels, abbreviated HG. These are resources that I use regularly, so these abbreviations are not difficult anymore to remember. Now compare this to the resources that show up in your context menu. Whenever you go to a reference, you go to the right, on the lookup, what resources do you see? A good chance that these are random resources that Logos gives to you, and you have no clue why Logos is giving you those resources. But if you take some time to prioritize your resources, then Logos will do exactly what you tell it to do. If you look closely, then you see that Logos is skipping from Old Testament quotations in the New Testament. It goes to a harmony of the Gospels, and it's skipping two resources from my prioritization list: the synopsis of the Old Testament and the harmony of Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles. And the reason for that is obvious, because they don't apply to Matthew 5 verse 33. They are Old Testament resources, so they don't apply. So Logos only gives me resources here that apply to my reference. Okay? Maurice Proctor taught me to prioritize at least 5 versified resources in this section, because the context menu only has space for 5 resources. But since not all of these 5 resources may apply to every passage, I recommend to prioritize at least a few more. So that's why I have prioritized here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So whenever I go to Jude, for example, Jude 3, I right click, the reference is selected, and now you see that Logos presents to me the NIV, Matthew Henry's commentary, New Manners and Customs, Old Testament quotations of the New Testament, and the Jude to 2 Peter parallels, thus skipping the other irrelevant resources. So why did I select these particular resources to be prioritized? Now the first one that you see here in the lookup, the NIV, is a little redundant, because Logos has a button that you click and it will take you to your preferred Bible. Okay, so I believe the NIV should not appear in lookup, but I cannot change that. The second one is the unabridged commentary on the whole Bible by Matthew Henry. Now this requires a little explanation. Why do I have this commentary prioritized? Is it my favorite commentary? No. Is it the best commentary? No. But it is my first choice of single volume commentaries on the whole Bible. And if you don't have this commentary, then you could also use JFB, Jamieson, Fawcett and Brown critical commentary on the whole Bible, which I believe is available for free. Here is where several tools and features of Logos work together to give you an amazingly smooth workflow. Because see what happens. Whenever I click a reference here, I make sure reference is selected. I go to Matthew Henry, and Matthew Henry opens up his commentary at verse 33. And when I click this parallel book sets icon, Logos allows me to browse through all of my commentary collections and pick any of the commentaries I want. Here are my application or devotional commentaries, followed by the background commentaries, followed by expository and intermediate commentaries, followed by my technical commentaries, and my translation commentaries. And I usually ignore the last column because that has all of my commentaries in a list that's just way too long. So in a nutshell, you right click, go to reference, you go to Matthew Henry, and from Matthew Henry you can very quickly open up your favorite technical commentary, which is, for example, the EBC, Expositor's Bible Commentary, written by Carson, and boom, you have your favorite commentary open. Now the same for example, John. One of my favorite commentaries is Pillar Commentary by Don Carson again. And so I go here to John, I open up the context menu, I click reference, I go to Matthew Henry. Matthew Henry is opened, and I go to parallel resource, And here is my favorite commentary on John. So this is a very quick way to open up your preferred commentary without the need to open up your passage guide. So in order for you to duplicate this behavior, you need to prioritize any single volume commentary on the whole Bible, whether that's Matthew Henry or Jameson, Fawcett and Brown or another one. That doesn't really matter. But you need to do one more thing. You need to add this commentary also to any of the commentary select collections that you have made. So whenever I go to my commentaries here, now you see that I have created several collections based on their character. I've created a collection for application commentaries, for background commentaries, expository commentaries. Let's look at technical commentaries. So I'll select this one. Let me scroll down until we see Matthew Henry. So here you see Matthew Henry's commentary on the whole Bible, complete and unabridged, in one volume. This does not tell me that Matthew Henry is a technical commentary. No, I trick Logos a little bit because what I want, I only add this commentary to this collection and to every other collection so that whenever I open Matthew Henry will be here at the top of all these collections. You see, Matthew Henry is everywhere. If Matthew Henry is missing in that collection, then that collection will not show up in your parallel resource sets. So when you add your commentary to your selection, make sure that this little box showing parallel books is ticked, because that will allow Logos to show you all those different collections. Well, next in my top 10 versified resources is the new manners and customs of the Bible. Here abbreviated with NMCB. Now let's have a look and go to Matthew 23 verse 5. This resource is also a resource that is structured by Bible reference. So anytime this cultural background resource has an article on a particular verse, then it shows up in my lookup resources in the context menu. So here in Matthew 23 verse 5, Jesus talks about people who make their phylacteries broad. Now, maybe some of you have never heard about the word phylacteries. So what in the world does that mean? So I right click, and again, from the reference, I go to the right, and now I open up the new manners and customs of the Bible. And it takes me to an article about phylacteries, and it even gives me a picture. So in short, I have prioritized this resource in order to quickly access cultural background information. Next is the Old Testament quotations in the New Testament, which allows me to quickly research which Old Testament is quoted in the New Testament. So, for example, when Jesus visits the synagogue in his hometown Nazareth, in Luke 4 verse 18, he reads from the prophet Isaiah. Now let's select these verses. Where in Isaiah do we find this quote? So you right click, you select the reference, and you open up the Old Testament quotes of the New Testament, and you see that Luke is quoting from Isaiah 61. Next, you see a number of synopsis or harmony resources, or parallel resources. For the Old Testament, Samuel, Kings and Chronicles, a harmony of the Gospels, Pauline letters, and Jude into Peter parallels. Now make sure you check the description of this video below to see a link to a video that I've created on how to study parallel passages using these resources. Now notice that these 5 harmonies or synopses cover different book ranges in the Bible, and that's why they don't compete with each other in the prioritization tool. So let's have a look at 2 Peter 1 verse 3 and right click. Now while we do see the NIV and Matthew Henry here, we don't see the new manners and customs of the Bible because there's nothing in this verse that this resource has an article about. So the next link is the Old Testament quotations of the New Testament, followed by the Jude to 2 Peter parallels. And I can open it up, and Logos gives me parallels between Jude and 2 Peter. Now, since this is my last versified prioritized resource here, Logos continues by offering me a random-ish resource. So if I want to have another one there, I should prioritize it here under versified prioritized resources. So my next section in my prioritization tool is my top 10, actually my top 5 topical prioritized resource. So these are resources that are not organized by Bible reference, but by topic, and that's why they are called topical resources. It's the place for your dictionaries and theological dictionaries, but I added a few very specific resources to overrule those standard resources in a few cases. So at the top of this section is the fauna and flora of the Bible. For researching animals and vegetation, I don't want a general Bible dictionary. No, rather I want a resource that specializes in these domains. So for example, when I go to Psalm 51 verse 7, where David says, "Purge me with hyssop." Now, look at the difference. When I select reference, there are the references that I just explained. But whenever I select hyssop, an English word, then the lookup section gives me different resources. And these are the resources, fauna and flora in the Bible. It also shows me the Merriam-Webster dictionary, followed by the Lexham Bible Dictionary here, followed by the Anchor Bible Dictionary and the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Dictionary. Meaning that the exhaustive dictionary of Bible names is not relevant here, nor is the dictionary of deities and demons in the Bible. The other resources I included here are the animals mentioned in the Bible, which is another resource focusing on the fauna in the Bible. And then next I have the exhaustive dictionary of Bible names, because I want to have one and the same starting point for researching biblical names in the Bible and their meanings. And I say starting point because from that resource I can always navigate quickly to the next dictionary or encyclopedia through the parallel resource sets. Next is the Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible. That gives me quick access to religious background information of the names of deities and demons in the Bible. And lastly, there is Merriam-Webster's dictionary for any English word that I need to look up in any resource, by the way. So let's take another example. Go to Psalm 104, verse 26. It speaks about the Leviathan. Now, when I right-click the word Leviathan, and I make sure the selection Leviathan is selected and not a reference, then Logos gives me, again, the fauna and flora of the Bible, because the Leviathan is an animal, is a monster. Okay, it's here categorized under serpent, adder, viper, Leviathan. But you also see animals mentioned in the Bible, but you also see the exhaustive dictionary of Bible names presented to you, because it's also the name of a monster. And then you see the dictionary of deities and demons, because it's also the name of a demon in the Bible. And finally you see Merriam-Webster, again, because it's also an English word. So again, Logos is doing exactly what I told it to do. Let's show one more example from Matthew 6:26. Look at the birds. Now you guess what? If I click birds here, then for sure fauna and flora is mentioned, animals mentioned in the Bible. There's a Lexham Bible Dictionary, which is the next one. And that's of course because there's no name involved, there's no deity and demon involved in the birds. So that's why it gives me the Lexham Bible Dictionary and the Anchor Yale Bible Dictionary and the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Dictionary in the order that I have prioritized them. But when you right-click Father, then you do see the Dictionary of Deity and Demons, because the word Father here refers to God, and God is a deity. So it opens up deity, the Dictionary of Deities and Demons, and then next Merriam-Webster and the New International Dictionary of the New Testament Theology and Exegesis, which brings me to the next section in my prioritization list, dictionaries. Whenever I click a theological term in the Bible that's not an animal, nor a name, or a deity or a demon, I expect Logos to give me some Bible dictionaries. Let's try that out on the word life. So I right click on life. You first see Merriam-Webster, because it's an English word, followed by the New International Dictionary of Theology and Exegesis, because that's the first theological dictionary that has an article on life. And let's see what were the other ones. Nidotti, there's the New International Dictionary on the New Testament, Old Testament, and the Zondervan International Bible Dictionary. So I skipped the Anchor Yale Bible Dictionary. Apparently because that one doesn't have an article on life. Anchor Yale Bible Dictionary. Let's double check that. So here's the Anchor Yale Bible Dictionary. And we see author of life, tree of life, but there's no article on life. So that's why Logos skips this Anchor Yale Bible Dictionary for the lemma life. So next I've prioritized some pseudepigrapha and apocrypha, but I'll move ahead to the Bible translations. And these are my Bible translations. 3 Dutch translations, the English Septuagint, and the Bible in Tok Pisin, a language of wider communication in Papua New Guinea, where I work. The next section is probably very unique, and you might have never heard about that before. So let me explain why I selected my English Bibles and prioritized them from literal to free. The most literal translations are at the top, and at the bottom are the most free translations. Why did I do that? Well, here is how you can benefit from it. The first thing I want to show you is that I have created a collection from literal to free. So these are my collection. This is my collection of Bible translations from free to literal. But the problem is that the collection tool does not have a way to sort them by level of literalness. They are usually sorted by title alphabetically, and I don't want that, because there's no purpose of that. So that's why I have prioritized these translations from literal to free, so that, let's now go to Matthew 2 in the ESV. So when I click the parallel resource sets, I see my collection from literal to free, but not arranged in alphabetical order, but arranged in the order that I prioritized from literal to free. And so now you can easily browse through these translations from a more literal to a more free translation, or you go and you say you use the right and left arrow keys on your keyboard to go from literal translation to a free translation. So next are my Hebrew Bibles, the Lexham Hebrew Bible, and my Greek Bibles. But remember, these will only follow my higher prioritized BHS and Nestle Aland. So these are my next preferred Hebrew and Greek Bibles. And now we come at the section of commentaries. Now, first thing to show you is that I have divided my commentaries in the prioritization list into 3 sections. The first one is the Bible commentaries on the Old Testament. The second section, of course, is the Bible commentaries on the New Testament. But then finally, I also have a section with preferred series of commentaries. So let me explain that in more detail. Let's first have a look at the commentaries on the Old Testament. So what I did was I decided to select at least 2 top commentaries for each book of the Bible. So you see the Word Biblical Commentary and a NICOT, which are my best commentaries on Genesis, NIV Application Commentary and a New American Commentary on Exodus, and so on. This way, I know that I always have at least 2 top commentaries available on any book of the Bible. For the New Testament, I did the same, but since I'm working a lot on the New Testament as a translator, I took a slightly different approach here. In order for my prioritization list to not be too long, I chose all my number 1 commentaries on each book of the New Testament, and I replaced the series name by the name Best Technical Commentaries number 1. So now that has become a series of volumes from different commentary series, and I created my own series out of it called Best Technical Commentaries number 1. I did the same for number 2 and number 3. And all the commentaries that you see below are my number 4, number 5, number 6 commentaries for that particular book. And finally, once Logos looked through all my specific prioritized commentaries, I sometimes have space for more commentaries, and in that case, I just want to prioritize some highly valuable series of commentaries. But they are overruled by individual volumes that are above this section. Now, let's demonstrate how that works in real life. Now remember, there are several ways to access your commentaries quickly. And one way I showed you earlier is in this video is by right-clicking and opening Matthew Henry's commentary on the whole Bible, and from there go to any of your commentary collections. So I use my technical commentaries a lot, so let's have a look there. Technical commentaries. And so here you see at the top Matthew Henry's commentary, because I put that resource in every single collection. And because it is prioritized above my commentaries in the section Versified Resources on top in my prioritization list, that's why it gets priority over all other commentaries down below. Next, you see the scripture parallels in ancient classics. Since I studied classics, this is a resource that I really like. So here, for example, is a reference. It's about Abraham, who is about to sacrifice his son Isaac, but then the angel of the Lord tells him not to do that, and he provides a ram. And then this resource gives a parallel from Euripides' Iphigenia in Aulis, where Iphigenia is snatched away by the goddess Artemis, who gave in exchange for her a hind, which my father sacrificed. Thinking that it was upon me, he laid a sharp sword, and she placed me to dwell in this land. Here's an example of a parallel to a deity preventing the sacrifice of a child by providing a substitute offering, found in Euripides' Iphigenia in Aulis. Notice that you now only see two of my commentaries, the Word Biblical Commentary and the Nicot Commentary, because I have prioritized those specific resources to be my number 1 and 2. And they are followed by some of the series that I have preferred, starting with the Lexham Research Commentary here, and the next is the Anchor Yale Bible Commentary. And this apparently means that I don't have the Genesis volume of any of these other series in between in my library. And then you can also go to your all parallel books, and if you haven't made any collections, then this is the only thing that you will see. And here you will see that Logos displays all the resources that you have prioritized that are relevant to this. And here you see all the parallel books. Oh, now actually you see here that the UBS Handbook on Genesis is available, and the translator's notes are available, and the exegetical helps are available, but the reason why they were not in the technical commentary series is that I have not marked them as technical commentary. So that's why they were skipped. But this demonstrates the usefulness of combining the powerful prioritization tool with the collections tool in Logos to create a workflow that works for you. And in the same way, also your passage guide is affected in the same way by your prioritization tool. So here let's open up John 4, the passage guide on John 4, for example. And here you see that my passage guide perfectly follows my prioritization list on John. Notes on the translation of the New Testament, best technical commentaries number 1, best number 2, best number 3, Lexham Geographic, and Alford. So first is Matthew Henry, Newton Manners and Customs, but then you see scripture parallels in the ancient classics, which was prioritized at the beginning of the Old Testament commentaries. Then we see notes on translation, which we saw under New Testament, and then we see best number 1, best number 2, best number 3, and then the Lexham Geographic and Alford. So again, Logos is doing exactly what I tell Logos to do. The more time and effort you put into your prioritization tool, the more Logos will be customized according to your own needs. Okay, so now we come to the final section of my prioritizations, and that's where I have prioritized my grammars. I have to say that this is a little bit misleading because Logos does not really prioritize grammars. Instead, the passage guide where the grammars appear sorts the grammars by title alphabetically. However, adding them here reminds me of my favorite grammars, and having said that, I did create a workaround to still let Logos prioritize my grammars in the grammar section in my passage guide. I renamed the title of the grammars by adding a number 1 and number 2 in front of the title. So for example, let me pull up Blas de Brunner Funk. So here, when you select the title and you click the information icon, then the title of the resource is editable. So what I did is I just added number 1 before the title, and since numbers come before letters in alphabetical order, now Logos will organize my grammars in the way that I prefer them. So now, when I open the passage guide, let's do Matthew 28. Then I go to grammars, The grammars are my Greek advanced grammars. And let's look at syntax. And what you now see is that my number 1 grammar is at the top, followed by my number 2 grammar, number 2. And here are my number 4, number 4, number 4. And number 6 grammars. I can click more. And more grammars will be presented. But my number 1 and my number 2 grammars are at the top. And I did that not really by using the prioritization tool, but by tricking Logos by editing the title of those resources to make it my number 1 and my number 2. I think we have finally come to the end of this prioritization list and thus to the end of this video. And I hope that this gives you some ideas on how to prioritize your resources in such a way that Logos becomes your assistant and that it will benefit your studies. If you appreciate this demonstration, please like the video and subscribe to my channel so you'll get future videos and so we can get our videos out to a wider audience. You're also welcome to support my Bible translation ministry in Papua New Guinea directly through the affiliate and donation links in the description of this video below. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.